Another of the interviews that was of interest was that which Seun Okinbaloye conducted on his Micon podcast on YouTube. This time, he interviewed the daughter of Alhaji Buba Galadima. Buba Galadima is a chieftain of the NNPP, an opposition party, and an ally of Senator Kwankwaso of the NNPP. So the daughter is also in politics, but she seemed to be on opposite sides with the father. So the daughter Zainab Buba Galadima was interviewed by Seun Okinbaloye, and it was quite an interesting interview. It was interesting in many respects because she is a politician and she is in the APC. She's in the ruling APC, and she's from the north. So she has the perspective of someone in the ruling party, and she also has the perspective of the north. So the interview was quite interesting. She is well read and well studied both in Nigeria and abroad. And she said that prior to 2015, she was one of those that campaigned for Buhari. That it was during that campaign, before the 2015 elections, that's where she met Professor Yemi Osinbajo. And then she was once a councillor. So in the course of the campaign, she met Professor Osinbajo, who was running mate to Buhari. And then, she told Osinbajo, when Osinbajo asked, she told Osinbajo about some of the things she's been doing, in her own small sphere, And so Osinbajo was quite intrigued by what she said, and that's how Osinbajo said that she should join him. So when they won, that she became technical assistant on SDG, some Sustainable Development Goals, in the Vice Presidency's office, and that's how she worked under the Buhari administration. But nevertheless, that, when asked how did the APC under Buhari and how Tinubu, has performed, and she said that she is not happy, she's not satisfied, that considering the promises they made to people prior to the 2015 election, that when Buhari emerged, that there was a lot of disappointment. And she mentioned that when asked, that Seun Okinbaloye asked if the vice president, if in her own opinion, the vice president was allowed to be quite involved in the government. And she said that there are a lot of impediments, the vice president wasn't really allowed to do much, except when the vice president was acting. That was when Buhari was sick and he traveled abroad, and the vice president was acting president at the time. So that if we saw what Osinbajo was able to do during that period, he gave an indication that if Osinbajo was given more leverage and more powers, he would have been able to do more. But unfortunately, that Osinbajo had more to offer, but Osinbajo wasn't given the opportunity to do so, And after Buhari Osinbajo left, she has also left. She's not working under the current Tinubu administration, but she's still a member of the APC. She said she's a member of APC, wait and see, still looking at the situation, but that she's disappointed in the Tinubu's administration. she said that if like the fuel subsidy removal, that before you remove something that will have a lot of impact on the life of the average Nigerian, you should have put in measures in place to mitigate the backlash, to mitigate the hardship that will be on the people. That such measures were not put in place, that people are really suffering. People are suffering. That now, as an APC person, and as someone who has campaigned for APC, that she is quite reluctant to go out to campaign again. That recently somebody contacted her that they should start doing some work on the 2027 campaigns, and she said that she has used all the goodwill that she has been given, and so that she finds it difficult to go out to tell people to now vote for the APC again, and so that it's quite difficult for her now to go and campaign for the APC. So Sheya Okinbaloye asked her that, does she think if the elections were to hold, what votes will the North still vote for Tinubu? So she said that Tinubu, if the election holds, that Tinubu will get like 30% or less votes from the North. That the votes Tinubu will get will be worse than what happened in 2023. He said, so Sheya Okinbaloye said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, what kind of, how will the votes go for Tinubu? So Zainab Buba Galadima said that this 2027 contest will be the toughest that Tinubu would face. That people are really suffering, that every time people try to contact her when she opens her phone, because of the hardship that they're enduring, that when she goes out, that more people are out in the street begging and are becoming even more desperate. And so she feels that a lot of people are not happy, a lot of people are dissatisfied with the Tinubu administration, and so that it's going to be a very tough election for Tinubu. So she was asked about the coalition and she said, well, the coalition is interesting, development is interesting, but she is not she doesn't know what is really going on with the coalition, and whether people will allow their personal ego to go and allow for somebody who will be the best candidate to emerge. That will be something to watch and see. Then she said she is quite reluctant to campaign for individuals. That she has done that before, campaigning for Buhari. So when you campaign for an individual and the individual turns out not to perform, so she is quite reluctant on campaigning for an individual. But he said that if the opposition coalition, if they can get their act together, that could be something, because that when she heard of the coalition unveiling ADC as their platform, that, is something that will really make the ruling party to sit up, So it was quite an interesting interview from a number of perspectives. She is from the North and she is in the ruling APC, and so she gets feedback on the ground both from members of the APC and from the public and also from the North, and she feels that it's going to be a tough fight for Tinubu. Tinubu is not going to find it easy. So what she advised is that it's not going to be easy. She was asked how easy it is for the opposition to defeat Tinubu in 2027. She said it's not going to be easy too for the opposition, but that the opposition has to come with their armies. The opposition has to be united. That if the opposition is scattered, that you want to go and fight someone, if you go scattered, you likely lose. But if the opposition could find a way of being united and present a common front, then they stand a good chance of doing something. But that is going to be a tough fight for Tinubu, which was quite interesting. And one other thing she said was that she said that currently that she was asked about the performance of Tinubu's ministers, and she said that the Tinubu's ministers, many of them are not doing much. They are not doing anything. That so Sheya asked, what about the FCT minister? What about the youth minister? What about this? What about that? And she said that it's only a few, 3 or 4. That most of the ministers aren't doing anything. That if you go to meet a minister, the first, some you will not even know they are ministers until somebody tells you, oh, he's a minister or she's a minister. And that if you go and talk to a minister about something, they will say, it's an interesting thing to work on, but that they don't have money. He said that the Buhari's ministers seem not to have money, unlike the Tinubu's ministers seem not to have as much money as Buhari's minister had. That there's incompetence both in this Tinubu's team and in Buhari's team, but that under Buhari, the ministers had more money and they have more freedom to do things. But now that these current ministers, they always complain that they don't have money, and that it's obvious that they don't really have, So they've not really been given much, and they don't seem to be able to be able to exert themselves and do much, And so that's going to be that is a problem, And she was also asked about her time in Buhari's administration, and she said that one of the things that happened in Buhari's time was the lack of people were not being fired. There was not a review process by which you judge the performance of people, of ministers, and now use that to say, okay, this one is underperforming, and so this person has to go and stuff like that. So she painted a bleak picture of how tough things are, amongst people, especially in the north. Then how the current ministers are not really doing anything, and that when you even approach the ministers with proposals, with things on how some things that could be done, they complain of lack of funding, So that really showed a lot about how the Tinubu administration is going, how the administration is being perceived from people who are on the ruling APC, and how people are dealing with the challenges they are facing with the policies that have been set in by the Tinubu administration, policies that were not quite thought out, that measures were not put in place to alleviate the suffering and the difficulties and the challenges that people would go through. So it was quite an interesting interview, and it's interesting to see somebody from the ruling party, from the north, a female, who has worked under the Buhari administration, who is still in the APC and has that broad perspective of being in the government and being in the ruling party and expressing our concerns. So we see how all of this play out. So it's obvious that, going by this Zainab's interview, that Tinubu has a lot to do, because people are really not happy with the administration, and we'll see how this one plays out in the future and in the 2027 elections.